All right, you guys. So go ahead with any questions that you have. In the meantime, I'm going to go ahead with what was emailed to me. And yes, John, I got your email. So we'll start with yours. Keith still doesn't love me. I'll just keep working at it, see if I can earn it. Let's see. Let me read to you a question I was mailed. Today, my ex-wife called to let me know that a woman that both of us knew separately had committed suicide. There's always something kind of stunning about that, isn't it? When somebody you know kills themselves. I had met this woman and her 4-year-old daughter, who, by the way, is adorable, on several occasions. I never saw any sign of depression or emptiness. Many, many people who kill themselves manage to hide it completely. She was either busy talking on the phone, talking to others, or playing with her daughter. One thing, though, I never knew she was married. About 6 months ago, I sent you a letter about another suicide here in Tampa. In this case, the person was a famous news anchor in his 30s, and from the surface, it appeared that he had everything in his life: money, thousands of friends, people that recognized him as he walked down the street, big house, loving wife. But in this case, just like the one with the person I knew, no one really could see that person's real emptiness and fear. I would speculate that both of these people hid it, and hid it very well. That's sad, but understandable. It's understandable for me because of insights you give me about real love and our getting and protecting behaviors. You have to understand that one reason that people wouldn't ever know this about these people is that one of the ways that we survive when we feel really bad is by looking good. I mean, if we feel down when we're home, when we're with other people, we have to look really bright and upbeat so that we can earn everybody's approval. It's like the only way we've got to survive is by earning everybody's imitation love in the form of praise. So we have to look good to everybody else. If we couldn't earn at least that little bit of imitation love, how in the world would we possibly survive? It's all we've got. And then we go home, and that's gone, and it's just utter despair. I can remember when I first spoke at an American Academy of Ophthalmology meeting. Oh my goodness, this is when I was first coming out and starting to tell the truth about my life many years ago, like 14 maybe years ago, or 15, a long time. And I spoke at an Academy meeting when I was first realizing that I had depression. This was back when I was still using. I was still an addict. Depression was the first thing I realized. And I stood up and talked about depression in front of, probably 1,000 ophthalmologists. And, you know, many people came up afterward and said, "We've known you for years, and we would never, never have guessed. You're one of the most, positive, upbeat, strong, put-together people we've ever known." Well, you think I was ever going to let you know this? It's what we do. It's how we get a feeling of acceptance, how we get a feeling of power, is by looking all put together. So John continues, I'm writing you today because in certain circumstances I see the choice, leaving the pig, as not only a selfish choice but a dangerous choice. Yet it is a choice. But if the pig is the world, life, or it is your pain, then the next choice of running from your pain by taking your own life is tragically wrong. Yeah. Without being able to see the pain people are in, how can we best help them from making this tragic life-ending choice? Well, if you can't see their pain, you couldn't possibly help them. All we can do, you couldn't help them specifically in their situation. which is why the only thing we can really ever do is be constantly teaching everybody around us what little bit we know about real love. I look at how many people in my life now I have told little bits of real love to. John, look at how many people in your life now you have told little bits of the principles of real love to. You have no idea how many of those people have felt little seeds of real love catch hold in their life. So you say, how could we have helped this specific person? Well, I don't know. But as we are constantly trying to lead more loving lives, and as we're sharing little bits of the principles of real love with people, we make a difference in the world around us. And we will reach people like this. So I may not be able to reach out and stop this particular person, but I'm helping people like her. Do you see? So we are making a difference in the world around us. We're reaching people like her without realizing that they're people like her. We're making a huge difference, one person at a time, and that's the only way we're ever going to be able to do it. So you talk to somebody in your family, you talk to somebody at work, I write a book, I write a video mail, you talk to a neighbor. We're all doing what we can do, and we're saving lives. No kidding. Sometimes it's a very undramatic thing. You share a book with a friend. You tell the truth about yourself to a neighbor. You never know which one of those things saved a life, do you? But some of them do. And some of the times, you'll never know when you saved a life. So you just keep loving people. But it is saving lives. Additionally, John says, I'm trying to learn more from these tragic events. I've already heard from several people that the woman in this case suffered from postpartum depression, but no one knew it. Although if her child was, 4 years old, she probably wasn't suffering from it at the time she killed herself. Personally, I see this as an excuse that maybe her friends are using to fill the void as to why she took her life. Sounds like probably they are using it as an excuse. And probably using an excuse to why, as to why they didn't really have to notice her pain. Although, they don't need to blame themselves either way. I mean, we are so good at hiding who we are that it's not really other people's job to notice our pain. It wasn't other people's job to notice my pain. I hid it so well that how could they have known until I was willing to tell somebody? One thing for certain, both of these events have shown me is that we as a human society, and this is the real lesson, are really missing out on real love. We are. And that we will make excuses for ourselves and others for not being unconditionally loving. For me, it's much easier to blame others than it is to see the real root of the problem, the lack of unconditional love in our lives. Exactly. Tragically, we all suffer from the same wound, the wound created by not being unconditionally loved, and it keeps us chained to a life of victimhood. I did a presentation today at a college here in Georgia. We made a proposal that they start implementing real love as the primary focus of their human resources in teaching their people. And it looks like we are going to have a contract with the Human Resources Department of that college here in Georgia. They're going to start teaching this to their top 40 managers. And start teaching this to at least 300 of their employees, and we're going to start implementing that pretty soon, which is pretty cool. But one of his questions was this title of the book, real love in the workplace. How do you deal with that? He said, how do you explain that to people? And I said, you explain it to them straight up. You don't dance around it, you don't back down, and you don't be bashful about it. You tell people, what is it that people are looking for more than anything else in their lives? What do people want? What do people lust for? What do they thirst for? What do they dream about? You can call it respect if you want. You can call it being cared for, being unconditionally accepted. You can call it whatever you want to, but all those words boil down to and are circumscribed by one word. People want to be loved. Well, you can dance around it if you want, but it's love. And there's nothing soft and mushy about it. That's what people want. And until they get it, they're screwed. And when they don't have it, they're going to cause problems everywhere. At home, personally, interacting with people in their families, and at work. And until we address that, until we talk about what John is talking about here, we're going to look for their interpersonal problems everywhere else and blame them on everything else except for where the root problem is, the lack of real love. And he realized, yeah, that's right. So all he needed was, how are we going to talk about it? How are we going to introduce it to the entire college? And so I told him, here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about it in flyers. We're going to talk about it in promotional materials. We're going to come in and do an entire college-wide campaign. We're going to do a pre-seminar introduction where I come in and talk about it to the student body and to the faculty. We're going to do whatever it takes until people get it, that we're going to talk about the L word, that it's the most important subject on the planet, until we don't go, love. No, it's love. And it's not love with hearts and candy and kisses. No, it's the most important thing we could talk about. And men can say it, like real men. And it's an important subject that we've all got to deal with, or it will kill us, like it killed this woman friend of yours, like it killed that news anchor. And until we do, we're dead. It's that important. Literally life or death. John says, I see the path to real love is very difficult for most people, including me. Yeah, it is. And one of the reasons that it's difficult, guess why? Is because we're not talking about it. Tell the truth about ourselves. Be seen for who we are. Be accepted and be loved unconditionally. I've pushed people sometimes to tell the truth about themselves because I see it as right. And that it will start them down a path that will free them from their hidden pain. I still see it as necessary. But learning to unconditionally love people, or being able to love people without expectations, should maybe be the first thing I get under my belt before I push people to tell the truth about themselves. Yes. Accept them first and tell the truth about you before you ever push somebody to tell the truth about them. Tell them great stories about how stupid you are. Tell them what you learned. Tell them the truth about a principle as it applied to you before you ever encourage somebody to tell the truth about them. That's the last thing they're going to do. I'm great at standing by and letting people make choices, running, safety, but actively loving them while they're making choices, while they're making their choices, is foreign to me, especially when I thought loving was correcting them by pointing out how stupid they were for not doing it the right way, my way. Or if they did it correctly, it could always be done better. I could always criticize and add some sarcasm for dessert. That's a nice mental image. This is a space I recognized I still need lots of help with. Gee, who doesn't there, sweetie? We all need help with that. But what a nice description. What a beautiful description of learning how to love better. And it's something we all need to learn to do better. So thanks for that letter. Jeru, I don't know if I'm saying this right, says, my daughter, 13, does not live with me. Her mother and I are divorced. But I see her often, like today. Her mother was unable to leave the operating room. She's a pediatric anesthesiologist. So I took my daughter home from school. We worked together in the parenting of our children. So in reading Real Love and Parenting, you encouraged a mother, Madeline, to tell her children how she had been unable to love them unconditionally in the past. And over time, it helped her children view the past differently. My daughter's mother is not familiar with real love. Do you recommend that I independently tell her of my mistakes? I know I yelled at her on a few occasions and showed displeasure many times when she didn't behave as I wanted her to. I seldom am angry with my daughter now, but my time is limited with her. I see she is often being a victim. Oh, I see. I see my daughter, I assume, is often being a victim, especially regarding her softball coach and how she treats her and the team. So it's clear she's not full of unconditional love, even though she is doing fine in school and elsewhere. What do you advise? Yeah. If you can identify times in the past when you have not been unconditionally loving with your daughter, absolutely identify with your daughter how you were not unconditionally loving with her. And I do highly recommend that at age 13, spend some time talking to her about the principles that you're learning from the Real Love and Parenting book. Talk to her about victimhood. Talk to her about what you're learning about how you have been a victim. Talk to her about things that she's experiencing, for example, with her friends. Talk to her about an experience, for example, that she's having. For example, let's say that she has been acting like a victim about her softball coach. Instead of saying to a child, if you say, I see you're being a victim with your softball coach. Children don't usually like being labeled something and told they're wrong. But you can start off by saying something like, it looked to me like you were frustrated with your softball coach. That's a great way to start. And she'll say, well, yeah, I'm frustrated. My softball coach is rah, rah, rah. And you can say, well, have you ever wondered why you're frustrated with your softball coach? Or have you ever wondered why your softball coach behaves the way she does? Or he does, whoever it is. Then you can, using real love principles, describe to your daughter in ways that she has never known why the coach acts like the coach acts. So you can describe in real love terms why an adult acts unlovingly. This will be a huge revelation to your daughter. Most kids never get to hear one adult describe how another adult, or why another adult behaves in an unloving way. They only get to hear another adult criticize another adult or defend another adult. Well, those are both stupid behaviors. Instead of simply explaining the behavior. Then after you have explained the behavior of the other adult, your coach behaves in this way because your coach doesn't feel loved. And when your coach controls you kids in this way, your coach gets a brief feeling of power or whatever. You explain it in real love terms. You know what the coach does. I wasn't there. Then you say, now, do you know why you feel frustrated when your coach does that? Then you can explain why your child feels like a victim and acts like a victim. And when you do it in a completely neutral, flat tone of voice, and you describe victimhood like you would describe the color of her hair, your child doesn't feel accused. Then you can describe alternate forms of behavior that your child could choose. Or you could, for example, say, the only reason that you feel like a victim is that you're not feeling sufficiently unconditionally loved in that moment. And the only reason that you don't feel sufficiently unconditionally loved in that moment is because over a lifetime, you haven't gotten enough unconditional love from your father. And that's me, do you see? Which completely lets your kid off the hook and shows how completely vulnerable you are. Do you have any idea how novel that is for a kid to hear? And how bonding that is? How much closer a child feels to a parent who hears, my father made a mistake? Oh, it's delightful. And you'll read, several examples that'll take you right through how to do that in the parenting book. It's no mystery at all. It takes you through almost word for word. Really pretty easy to do and fun for the kid and fun for you too. Let me know if that makes sense to you. And if it doesn't, I'll try it in Spanish, which I don't speak. Kids love those frank discussions, just like it's a hoot. Notice, you don't have to involve any reference to your ex-wife at all. You never do. Melissa says, I was going out with a man for a couple of months. Let's see, I was going out with a man at the time I met Jay for a couple of months. When I started seeing Jay, my romantic relationship with A ended. I extended an invitation to A to remain friends. He said that he would, but that he still had romantic feelings for me. A week and a half ago, he invited me to lunch at his home. When I arrived, he asked me if I would make love to him. I told him that I couldn't do that. This is a fairly common story. I wanted to run like hell from his home. After listening to him talk about his feelings about the situation, I told him I couldn't listen and I had to leave. Since then, I have let him know that I have not been able to be loving with him enough to talk about it. I went empty over it. Since then, in the calls that I have made, I have come to see that I was using A and clinging to him. I have also come to really understand how many of the friends I have in my life only have $2 in their bank account. I'm also recognizing that I have been going to the well to fill up my bucket at wells that are dry. Oh, how many of us have done that our entire lives long? Jay has previously asked me to stop being friends with A because of the previous intimacy making him uncomfortable. That's also a very common thing. In the past, I was concerned that this was a sign of control. I can see how this relationship would make him uncomfortable, and I want him to feel loved by me more than I want to be responsible for A's feelings. Historically, it has been hard for me to let go of people. Of course. I always thought I would be bad and wrong to say, no, I don't want to be your friend. I'm still struggling with the best way to say this to A. Do you have any suggestions? Oh, sure. It's very common to be in multiple relationships that are either intimate or potentially intimate. I mean, how many times have you heard this story? Variations on it, where one person is in either two intimate relationships at the same time, or in one leaving another, where there's potential jealousy or trying to leave one. There's so many variations on this that we've heard them thousands of times. And what do? And invariably, somebody is using somebody. And the details as to who's aren't all that important. But in this case, it's pretty clear that, at least it's real obvious here, that A is very intent on using you. You're clear on that. And, you know, there may be some jealousy on Jay's part. That's not real clear from the story. Maybe. Some element of control, possibly. But A is pretty clear. You know, make love to me. And it sounds like you're feeling uncomfortable around him, and yet you want to cut off the relationship, and you're worried about hurting him. It sounds pretty clear from your relating the story that your relationship with A, and you need to correct me here if I'm wrong, is not, because you talk about going to the well that is dry and so on. It sounds pretty clear that he's not healthy for your spirituality, does not fill up your well. If that's the case, life is too short. We can't afford to be in relationships that are going to drain us of real love. We can't afford it. It's too expensive. Keep in mind that when I talk to people, for example, who say, well, but I can't say no to my mother. She's my mother. And I say, yes, so? If anybody takes whatever little supply of real love that you have, and every time you're with them, poof, drains that little bit of supply you've got, you have to stay completely away from them until you're stronger. I've actually called people up, called their parents up, or in some cases, dictated over the phone to people a message that they'll say to their parents, like this one. Mother, I've talked to my counselor, and my counselor has told me this. I'm not strong enough at this point in my recovery or my progress. It's too confusing to me to be around really pretty much anybody. It's not your fault, but there's some things I have to learn. I can't be around my family because I get too confused. I go back to old behaviors that are too harmful to me. And so until I call you again, I can't have conversations with you. Now, notice, she didn't blame her mother. She didn't say, because of you. No, because of me, because I'm too weak. So, for example, with A, let me read your message here. All right, so Melissa's saying the thing was, it wasn't clear. I always felt very peaceful with him and trusted him. I was blown away by what happened. Jay told me I just missed the signs. I don't know what to think about that. I feel I don't know what is the field of death and what is the field of life. Yes, I agree. Which is why you need to say to A, you need to say, I am too confused. I'm too weak in relationships to be in any kind of intimate relationship right now. So I need to not have any kind of contact with you at all until I contact you. That means no conversations in person, no letters, no emails, no phone calls. Notice what I just said. Because I am too weak and too confused about relationships, I need to not have any contact with you. You're not blaming him. Like you just said, you don't know what's the field of life and you don't know what's the field of death. Most of us have been playing on the field of death for so long and are so used to being there, we don't know the difference anymore between what's the field of death and the field of life. We're absolutely too freaking confused. And that's why you've been missing the signs. So when this happened, you were floored. That proves to you that you don't know the difference, that you're too confused, that you can't be in an intimate relationship. Which is why I tell people when they're first learning about real love, don't be in one, because you'll screw it up. You will. It's not like you might, it's you will. So when somebody's in a difficult relationship and they're not married, I tell them, get out, because it's too difficult to learn how to have a relationship, to learn about real love while you're in one. Now, if you're already married, well, you've already made that commitment and you're just going to have to learn how to do it. But if you haven't made that lifetime commitment, don't try to figure it out while you're in one. It's just too tough. It's too distracting. Trying to figure it out while you're having those huge expectations of an exclusive partner, that's just insane. That's like trying to learn how to play baseball while you're in the World Series. It's just nuts. The expectations are too high. Let me know if that makes sense. The Pleasanton group. Before we get to that, Alex says, what if that person is a coworker, the person who drains you? Then what you do is you avoid that person absolutely as much as you can, except where it has to do only with work. So when you've got business to transact, you do it. But when it comes to sitting around chatting and so on, you say, I have to get back to work. And if they keep it up, then if necessary, sometime after work, you explain to them why. You sit down and you explain, I have some personal things that I have to work out, and right now I'm just pretty much keeping to myself, mostly. And you leave it at that. And if they don't understand it, too freaking bad. But you can't be around people who drain you. It's too expensive. You can't give up your own health and well-being just so that somebody isn't annoyed with you. And if they're annoyed, okay, you're just going to have to ignore it. That's the way it goes. Pleasanton. A friend of mine has a 3-year-old who's very clingy. Constantly needs to have somebody interact with him. Like when his parents want to talk without being interrupted for 10 minutes, he will badger them to play with him. How should they respond? You can virtually bet that they are not paying him enough attention. And if you'll watch them interact with this 3-year-old, I'll bet you, without being around them, that what they do is this. This 3-year-old is clingy, 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 and, mommy. And when they pay attention to the 3-year-old is when he badgers them for attention. So, an example. I had a mother who was telling me, my child is constantly going, mommy, mommy, mom. And I said, yeah, and when do you pay attention to the child? When the child goes, mommy, mom. I said, if you only paid attention to me when I came and stuck a gun in your face and said, pay attention to me, it wouldn't be very fulfilling for either of us, would it? And that's the problem with your kid. When the child demands attention and then you give the child attention, it doesn't count. Do you see? Because you're only paying the child for what the child is demanding. So what you do with a kid like that is 10, 20 times a day, whatever it takes, you go out of your way to pay attention to the kid for no reason. So what I told this mother was 10 times a day for 5 minutes. You go find this kid and you pay attention to the kid like this. Here's the kid's face, and you get down on the floor. You don't just walk in the room and go, so, how are you? The kid knows when he's being ignored. That's why he's bothering you all day long, because you ignore him. That's why he was always pulling at her skirt. You go find the kid and get down on the floor on your belly, and you get in the kid's face and say, so how are you doing? So show me what you're drawing. And look into the child's eyes and pay attention to the kid. And for 5 minutes, really pay close attention to the kid. And then, every time the child comes and clings, you might, for example, hand the child an egg timer and say, I put the timer on 5 minutes. As soon as the timer rings, I'm busy right now, but as soon as the timer rings, you come and get me, and I will stop what I'm doing, and I will come and spend time with you. And then you better stop what you're doing. In other words, you're communicating to your child that the child's most important thing in the world. You don't respond to the clinging. You get nothing for that. Instead, you go look for the kid. And you make it a point to let the kid know you have appointments with the kid, with the egg timer. Whatever it takes. But you don't respond just to the whining. That's zero. You don't get any credit for it. No points. So this mother did that for a week. I called her up after a week, and I said, how's it going? She said, I can't find him. He quit clinging. All he wanted to know was that she loved him. That's it. That's all the whining was about. Mommy, mommy. All that means is, do you love me? Do you love me? And because all week long she went and found him and went, because all this is, when you look at a kid's eyes, is I love you, I love you. And because she told him that 10 times a day, he got the message. Mom loves me. So he quit asking her. Get the point? It's all about real love. It really is. It's not a technique. It's not a trick. It's really about loving people. It works for kids. It works for adults. It's not a game. Let me know, Pleasanton, if that makes sense. John says, your comment about men and love works back into the email I sent you. As a man, loving is hard because I'm worried about what others will think of me, or am I even coming across as loving? I'm in the space of observing more than interacting. I want to be all friendly with everyone, but I must still be scared of something. Oh yeah, men are afraid of what loving even looks like. Men just don't even know. Which, by the way, is one reason. Women don't get this, by the way. I'm going to get to this in a second. There's something, I got to remember this. There's something that's holding me back. I've been quite quiet and reserved for the past 2 years. Oddly enough, I was voted the friendliest in my senior class in high school. But since I'm not sure if I'm coming across as loving, I've just shut up. Do you have any suggestions to get me out of this space? Thanks. Yeah, just be honest. The more you're honest about what you're thinking, and the less you're concerned about what people think about you, the less afraid you'll become. That's it. It's all about just telling the truth. That's why in the entire Real Love book, the less people think about the technique and just stick with, I'm going to tell the truth. That's it. That's the whole technique of the entire book. The happier they'll be. You tell the truth, and then you let happen what's going to happen, which is why Real Love works for men. There's not a way to be. What does loving look like? Oh, you don't have to worry about that. All you have to do is tell the truth. See, men don't know what loving looks like. And this is the thing women don't get about men. Men want to be loving, but they don't know what it looks like. Which is why women don't understand what looks to them like an obsession on men's part with sex. Women think men are obsessed with sex because of the sexual act. Pay attention. By the way, men don't understand this either. Men have never been allowed to be truthful, which is what leads to feeling loved. From the time you women, from the time you were little girls, you were allowed to tell the truth. You could, when you were, for example, in the 5th grade, you could go out on the school ground and go, I'm feeling lonely. And the other girls would say, oh, Susie, why are you lonely? You know what would happen to you if you were in the 5th grade and you were a guy and you said, I'm feeling empty and afraid. You would be killed. You would be absolutely isolated. I mean, you'd hear the snapping of alligator jaws from around the block. You'd be cut off. You'd be the poor little kid that no other kid would speak to for the rest of his life. You'd be the kid who'd be picked last on the softball and on the kickball teams forever. You wouldn't be allowed to tell the truth about that. You can't go out on the 5th grade at recess and say, I miss my mommy. But girls can. See, we're not allowed to tell the truth. You're not allowed to create bonds of intimacy like that as a guy. And so most men grow up thinking that the only moments of intimacy, the only moments of closeness that they're ever going to experience are during sex. And that's pretty much the only moments of closeness they ever do experience. Except maybe if you score a touchdown. And then there might be a moment of closeness with your teammates. That's about it, which is one of the reasons guys love sports. Or there might be moments of closeness briefly if you're falling down drunk, which is one of the reasons guys like to get drunk together. You starting to get the picture of guys now? It's a freaking lonely world because we're not allowed to be honest. So real love works especially well with guys because really it just makes the path to real love so simple. You get to just tell the truth. And it takes real guts to do it. Guys get that. Oh, all right, it takes a real man to tell the truth. Yeah. In fact, it takes more guts than running into a burning building. Oh, okay, I can do that. It takes a real man to do that. And then guys go, well, all right, maybe I could do this real love thing. See? As opposed to it's, roses and candy and softness. Make more sense? Let's see. Pleasanton. Pleasanton says it makes sense about the 3-year-old and paying attention to the 3-year-old, and then says, my 11-year-old son often forgets to feed his dog before he goes to school. I don't necessarily mind feeding the dog. Yet I'm wondering if I should be concerned about this lack of responsibility and whether there should be a consequence. Yeah, there should be a consequence. Yeah, and yes, you should be concerned. Now, so this is the kind of thing where you sit down and you can explain it to the child ahead of time. So you say, would it bother you if I didn't feed you at dinner time? Would that bother you? So, well, obviously he would say, yeah, it would bother him. So, well, it bothers the dog if you don't feed the dog. So it hasn't worked for me to tell you to feed the dog. So we need to work something out that's going to help you to remember to feed the dog. My simply telling you hasn't worked. And so I'm not going to nag you about it anymore. Your son's going to love that. So you say, so telling you hasn't worked, so what we need to do is work out a consequence, something that will help you remember. So you not feeding the dogs is no fun for the dog, so let's work out something that will help you remember. How about not feeding you? The dog doesn't get fed. How about if you don't get fed? Because your child will remember that. And then you work out something that your child's going to get. So it would be either you'd work out, I don't know how he gets fed at school, but for example, I don't know if he takes lunch money to school, but it might be that he doesn't get lunch money for school and misses lunch, whether he takes a bag lunch to school, or perhaps he misses dinner the day that he doesn't feed the dog. We've done this with all of our kids, where, for example, the consequence, oops, I don't know how that happened. Mike? Suddenly disconnected. Never happens to me. It just suddenly said, connect failed. And now, huh? It says this is working. I was just talking along and so. You're still on video. I am. Yeah, your video is still working. Really? Yeah. It right here, it says connect failed.
Your laptop. But our connection is still working.
You can see me?
Yeah, you're still working.
That's strange.
You're on 2 different connection lines, remember?
Oh.
So.
Sorry, folks, but... So I just keep talking?
Yeah.
Sorry about that, kids. My laptop suddenly showed that I'm not connected, and apparently I am. Wow. But see, Mike has this connected on 2 different computer things, so I'm like freaked out. I'm just going to keep talking. But I just can't see what they're typing. Anyway, Mike assures me that we're working. So I was talking about the dogs. So sort of disconcerted me. So what was I talking about? So we're talking about missing a meal. So you work it out ahead of time with the kid, and as long as you work it out ahead of time, no problem. So you say, so which would you rather do? Would you rather miss lunch? Would you rather miss dinner? But if you work it out ahead of time, at least with our kids, when you say, all right, so the consequence of you not feeding the dog will be that if the dog misses dinner, so will you. And with our kids, I can tell you, I don't know if any kid ever had to miss more than one meal. Because then what happens is the consequence teaches them. You don't have to. This is what's so cool. I watch parents nag their kids and nag them, and that's a stupid way to teach. You tell your kids, I'm not going to nag you anymore. Then when the kid fails to feed the dog, and they come home from school that day, you say, and then they show up at the dinner table, you say, oh, no, we already discussed that. And you're done. No more talking, no lecturing, but they don't eat dinner, and they don't eat it later. They don't eat. They won't miss it again. Because then what happens is the next morning, when it's time to feed the dog, the kid's going to do this in his head, all by himself. You won't need to do anything. You don't nag. The kid's going to go, well, I'm just going to go to school. No, I'm not. Because if I go to school and I don't feed the dog, I'm going to miss dinner again. And he's going to feed the dog. Because he'd be an idiot not to. It's the same reason. And why? Because it's how life works. Hello? It's how it works for all of us, isn't it? I mean, when you get up in the morning, you don't go to work because the boss will be mad at you if you don't. You go to work because, well, if you don't go, you won't get paid. Because you'll get fired. Because the consequences are, well, negative. And that's how life goes. You want to teach that to your kids before they go out into the real world, and the world, smacks them up the side of the head with it, don't you? So it's a way smarter way to learn. So I suggest that you teach it to them, now and not when they're 40. And, at first they'll be like a little stunned, but it's a whole lot easier than nagging them, which everybody hates. It's way easier. Takes all the pressure out of it. And in the end, they love it. They love you for it because they hate the nagging. You can see me, huh?
Yeah.
Cool. So the other one just takes over?
Yeah.
Cool.
It's Windows Vista, so you still won't be able to see what
That's okay.
this is.
Now, can you tell me if there are any more questions?
It says, Melissa H. says, Jay wants me to discontinue the relationship with A permanently.
Yeah.
If I say what you suggest, then it leaves an opening for that.
Oh, I see. Okay. So Melissa says that Jay wants me to discontinue the relationship with A permanently. And if I do what you suggest, it leaves an opening for a relationship with A. And so what I would say to Jay is, that's none of your business, because I'm not married to you. Make sense? What you're telling A is, I'm not ready for a relationship with you now. And when I'm ready for one, I'll call you. And so you tell Jay, that's what I plan on telling A. If I were married to you, then I would owe you an explanation. But I'm not, so I don't. Simple as that. And it may turn out that then when you're ready for a relationship, you won't want a relationship with A. But that's your business, not Jay's. And then, if you would, let me know if that makes sense to you, since I can't see your answers, since my computer's, for some reason, not working. And you all can ask all the questions you want to, just for some reason my computer's having a little tantrum. It's doing John's 3-year-old little version. It's clinging. Pleasanton group. When my son does not do his work around the house, the situation is clear. He either does it on time, or he doesn't, and will have a consequence. But I'm more confused about schoolwork. If he gets bad grades because of missed homework, should that be handled the same way as missed housework? That's such a great question. It depends on their age. If they're young, and I always put it this way, and it's taught this way in the parenting book. You allow children to make their own choices as they're able to understand the consequences. So, you don't allow a 2-year-old to make her own choice about whether, for example, she will drink cleaning solvent. You don't say, well, you make your own choice, because she doesn't understand the consequences. She would drink the cleaning solvent and kill herself. You don't allow a 6-year-old or an 8-year-old to make their own choices about homework, because they wouldn't do it. And they'd grow hopelessly behind to the point where it would just be irretrievable, and you'd have a kid who is illiterate. At some point in their lives, you have to let a kid make their own choice about homework and let them experience the bad grade. I didn't let our kids make those choices until they were older, until they were like, say starting in high school. They don't get it until they're older. And then what we do is we'd let them make it maybe late middle school, and then you'd let them make it one assignment at a time. You'd experiment. So like, there's an example of it in the parenting book. I think it's with Joseph. Can't remember. You'll find it in the parenting book. But like, I gave an example of one of my children, and the child said, I said, so did you do your English assignment? No, I'll do it later. And I said, oh, okay, not a problem. And knowing that he was not going to get it done on time. So sure enough, he screwed around and, waited till the last second, and so then later on I said, so how'd that English assignment go? Oh, crap, I got a bad grade, really? So why do you think you got a bad grade? Oh, well, the teacher, the teacher? No, so then we talked about it until, the child, whoever it was, admitted that, well, he got a bad grade because instead of starting on the assignment a week ahead of time, he turned in his first draft, which was done 6 minutes before it was due. You can't do a good paper on your first draft. You start it a week ahead of time, you do your first draft, and then you work on it a little bit, second draft, and you turn in your third or fourth draft after you've actually put some, crazy thought into it. And so he realized, crud, I did this to myself. So by allowing him to screw up and make his own mistake, and by showing him how he did it to himself without lecturing him or making him feel bad about it, he said, I think I'm going to put a little bit more effort into it the next time. And, start a little bit earlier. Put a little bit, more work into this, and maybe turn in my second draft, which is, a little more thoughtful than the first draft. And so you experiment with letting them make choices about their homework, one little assignment at a time, not all at once, like, okay, go ahead, do whatever you want to. And bit by bit, our kids learn to take over the responsibility of their own grades and their own schoolwork. So that's how you do it. One little, and eventually they did. Eventually we didn't worry about their schoolwork at all. They just did it their own, or their own selves. So that's what I would suggest with kids. But you don't turn it over to them too early, because they just don't get it. They don't get how important it is. And you don't control them all the way through school. If you do, the minute they leave home, you're either going to have rigidly controlled, resentful kids, or they're going to just become wild. and just go straight into the gutter. And either way, they're not going to be happy. Looks like we've only got 2 minutes left. Yeah, looks like it. So, sorry about the little technical screw up, but at least you guys could see what you're doing, even though I couldn't. So I'm going to be gone next Tuesday. We're going to have a highly qualified, incredibly brilliant real love coach here taking my place. And you'll all be here helping him or her. I'm going to be going out tomorrow morning at getting up at 3 so that we can go to Spokane and do the filming of the PBS special. It's been an absolute delight being with you. And until then, we love you tons. We'll see you in 2 weeks.